coming in to save the motherfucking day. Yeah, America, fuck
Yes.
freedom is the only way.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. Living in Los Angeles, of course, my friends and acquaintances call and write to me asking what's going on over there. First of all, I want to say that 99% of the city is living its usual peaceful life, and only 1% of the city. Trained street-fighting squads of the Democratic Party are throwing bricks delivered to them on trucks and stacked on pallets in different directions. They throw them at the police, burn cars there, throw what are called Molotov cocktails, as well as items delivered from operational centers. Naturally, the leadership of this operation is not from the California squads, but from the party leadership, that is, the federal level. I would put it this way. Well, of course, they also have bases and branches in California as well. Those who get tired of throwing stones are given sandwiches, Coca-Cola, and a chance to rest, and then they go back to the fight. I'll tell you more in detail. But besides that, there are many other things happening in the homeland of capitalism. Although some will say that capitalism was born in Great Britain, and also from the internet. Europe decided partially to join the United States in the fight against China's trade manipulations. So they're fed up with it there too. Of course, Chinese communists are ideologically closer to the European Union leadership than America's free market advocates, but even the globalists have had enough. So even the globalists have started to feel something from the communists.
Europe is done with China, and this major shift is costing Beijing almost $1 trillion.
The European Union plans to increase tariffs on Chinese electric cars. Too often, our companies are excluded from foreign markets or fall victim to predatory practices. We haven't forgotten about China's unfair trade practices.
China sharply condemned the European Commission's decision to investigate its subsidies for electric vehicles.
When American tariffs crashed China's markets, Beijing rushed to Europe, hoping for open arms and big deals. For a short time, everything looked very promising. Lavish summits were held, bold promises were made, but the honeymoon ended. The European Union is reducing Chinese exports, scrutinizing Beijing's dubious trade practices, and banning companies connected to China.
Well, they almost merged in ecstasy. Against America, of course. Who else would it be against? Yes, against the hated Trump, against some kind of hated freedom. They want freedom, they want it. But suddenly they discovered that their new friend immediately started deceiving them. Well, just not even a second expecting it. And he was lying about everything he could, in everything where it was possible to lie. It's not like Europeans are all such truth-tellers, fighters for the truth. But even for them, it turned out to be too much.
This serious turn leaves Kita cut off from one of the largest markets in the world. The Communist Party of China placed its bet on Europe as a lifeline, but now it's facing a harsh reality. So what triggered the European revolt, and what does it mean for the economic future of the world? Let's figure out this chaos. Right now, things are not easy for Kita in Europe. Let's start by discussing the most recent, frankly hostile steps that show what kind of mood Europe is in. In June 2025, Europe dealt a serious blow by blocking access for Chinese companies to contracts for supplying medical equipment in the European Union. Why? The thing is, China was caught in fraud, favoring its own companies in questionable deals, and Europe is no longer willing to tolerate it. The European Union is responding with tough tariffs on Chinese medical equipment, steel, tires, and heavy machinery. All this is being done to stop the flow of cheap Chinese goods that are ruining local businesses. Europe is so serious about this that it even plans to introduce taxes on ultra-cheap imports from platforms like Temu and Shein in order to weaken China's monopoly in the field of e-commerce. In Europe, risk reduction is an effort to reduce dependency on China's economy. Beijing is retaliating with feeble probes into European pork and dairy products. But it's clear that Xi Jinping is just panicking. It's not just about trade here. Europe is slamming the door on China's technological tricks. Germany is removing 5G from its network due to concerns about espionage from China. The European Union is scrutinizing Chinese electric cars and wind turbines, suspecting they are engineered for data theft. Europe is also hastily working to eliminate its reliance on China for critically important materials like lithium, which China is hoarding like a greedy giant. We'll talk about this in more detail later in the video.
So where are you flying to, Clay Obman? And before, well, they didn't poke around. Wherever you poked, in that sense, they did poke around, yes, but when Trump started, everything fell apart for them, so now Europe can't say that to their voters. I mean, we didn't know. How could we not know? Well, maybe we just didn't want to know, that's all. And right away, questions start coming up like, maybe you were paid to sell us out to the Chinese? By the way, that's very possible. In fact, I'd even say there's a 90 to 95% chance that's exactly what happened.
China's desperate need for European markets isn't just about ambition, it's essentially a matter of survival. After the United States imposed substantial tariffs, such as 125% on electronics, China's exports to the United States fell significantly in early 2025. These are billions in losses for a country whose factories must operate non-stop to provide jobs for millions of people. Europe, with its nearly trillion-dollar market, seemed like the perfect lifeline to compensate for the lost sales. Kitai thought it could charm the European Union with cheap goods and large projects to keep its economy afloat. But this plan is falling apart, and Beijing is learning from its own experience that Europe will not become its backup option. Instead of being welcomed with open arms, the European Union is pushing back and Kitai is left only trying to save face. But the main question is, how did we even get here? To truly understand why Europe is pulling away, we need to look at the events of a few years ago. The reactions may be recent, but the issues between China and the United States began in 2018. Yes, that was when President Trump had just taken office. United States of America. Under Trump, tariffs were imposed on Chinese goods, making it harder for China to sell products like steel and electronics in the United States. China's economy relies heavily on exports, so this was a serious blow. Since the United States market became tougher, China needed to find a new place to sell its products and keep its factories running.
But then the Democrats came, got some money from the Chinese, and once again allowed them to ruin America and its people. Well, first of all, American workers, and of course, small business owners. By the way, let's talk about electric cars now.
This market flood occurred across all industries, including the automotive sector. Chinese electric car companies have significantly expanded their presence in Europe, which is a concerning development. Upon entering the market, they began offering electric cars at prices European manufacturers struggled to match. For example, an electric sport utility vehicle can cost 20% less than a similar car from Or. How did they manage to do that? The Chinese government gave these companies large subsidies.
Let me explain. To drive Europeans out of their own market, including Americans as well. The Chinese Communist Party subsidized its manufacturers, allowing them to sell cars 20 and sometimes even 30% cheaper than similar, so to speak, comparable European models. They did the same thing with steel, with aluminum, with electrical appliances, basically with all electrical engineering. But in all international agreements, it is written and signed that dumping is prohibited. I think Kitai just gave bribes to the leadership. Well, to everyone they could, they gave bribes. So what if they spent $1 million from the budget on bribes? They won billions in return. And in this way, they first ruined the American industries, and now they're ruining the European ones too. And the Europeans, Americans, Australians, and all the other Swedes took bribes, not caring about their own countries. Well, and all these signed commitments.
China is sticking its claws everywhere. Naturally, such dominance in the market does not come without consequences for Europe. Companies like the one that provides jobs for thousands of people in Germany have started losing sales. Factories that produced auto parts suffered even more, as did a number of other European industries. At the current rate, tens of thousands of jobs have been lost, since manufacturers announced major layoffs. Other industries also began to feel the pressure. Chinese steel is cheap, European manufacturers can't compete. In places like Italy, where small factories produce equipment, businesses are shutting down. In Poland, workers in manufacturing are worried about their jobs. The numbers speak for themselves. In 2024, China exported goods worth $600 billion to the European Union, becoming the largest source of imports for Europe. But Europe sold much less to China. The trade deficit amounted to a staggering $330 billion. This exceeds the deficit of $320 billion in 2023, but is still less than the record deficit of $427 billion in 2022. This is a strong trend of money flowing out of Europe into China. This imbalance has finally started to worry European leaders. They fear that if this continues, entire industries could collapse when China takes over the market.
So the sneaky European leaders have finally realized that they're risking not only millions of jobs lost, they're unconcerned about that, but they worry about maintaining their powerful positions at the top. We also say food pyramid. I guess in Russian there's something similar that's said too. But now, you see, this started to bother them because, well, they definitely don't want to give up their positions, their piece of the pie, their seat at the table, so to speak, or anything like that. And they started doing the very same thing they angrily condemned when Trump did it, namely punishing China for violating international agreements. But how can you punish, raise tariffs? So what is Trump's strategy? What does he offer to partners who will join cooperation with the United States? What will happen? What's good about it? Because Trump always has a stick and always has a carrot. Let's see what the stick is and what the carrot is.
While Europe is struggling with these problems, the United States is putting additional pressure. President Trump refuses to yield to China and is escalating pressure on the country. His new trade policy is entirely based on tariffs. He aims to make Chinese goods as expensive as possible in the United States. Now he is imposing a 125% tariff on some Chinese electronics and a 50% tariff on steel. However, Trump is going further by proposing a deal to other nations, including those in Europe. The offer is simple. If you restrict access for Chinese goods to your markets, the United States will lower tariffs on your exports. For example, if the European Union agrees to limit imports of Chinese steel, the United States could lower tariffs on European cars or wine. It's a tempting offer, since Europe supplies goods to the United States worth about $570 billion every year. Better access to the American market could mean more sales and, again, more jobs.
I really hope, I'm not sure, but I hope that the European Union will come to its senses. Well, I give it a 20% chance, 30 at most, and will demand that Kitai stop, or more likely will demand additional bribes. I give it a 70-80% chance. I always hope for the best.
So, as you, my dear viewers, undoubtedly already know, the great Saint Greta Thunberg is heading to Gaza with a flotilla, but now Israel has detained her and the entire flotilla. And here is a photo of Greta smiling while an Israeli soldier hands her a turkey sandwich in a plastic wrapper. But even more importantly, Israel is going to make them watch something before sending them back home outside of Israel. That's the point of the story. Israeli forces took control of a ship headed to Gaza called Madeleine Rano early Monday morning and detained a group of 12 activists who were on board. After repeated warnings to the activists not to try to sail to the coast of Gaza, which is under a strict naval blockade. By the way, when people talk about a blockade, that's not right, it's terrible. Why do you think people in Gaza are so outraged? Why do you think this blockade exists? Because Israel wants to be mean and cruel.
No.
Because they gave Gaza away, they said, go ahead, succeed. But they chose Hamas, started firing rockets at Israel, and created a terrorist infrastructure. That's why Israel says, you know, we probably have to control what comes in and out of here, not because we want to be mean, but to protect ourselves. This is outrageous and a blockade. No, it's control over weapons supplies.
A group of semi-literate, some even say a quarter-literate, activists sailed to Gaza to observe and condemn the occupation. They went to condemn immediately. They said they would look, but condemn it right away. Naturally, they were stopped. How could it be otherwise? If it's a blockade, of course they were stopped, but they thought they wouldn't be stopped. And before they're sent home, they'll be made to watch 43 minutes, a video of Hamas atrocities on Israeli territory. This is the very nightmare story because of which, in fact, everything has started right now. The grinding down and destruction of Hamas and the attempt to expel Gaza. So, will people believe it? What does believing actually mean? They will, of course, watch. I'm just afraid they won't care. After this, activists will still say whatever they're paid to say. It seems they don't care about anyone, regardless of race or ethnicity. Jews, Arabs, black people, white people, or anyone else. They just need to get paid and have a seat at the table. And maybe, by the way, they even decide that the Jews are trying to trick us again, because our beloved Muslims couldn't have done something like that, God forbid. All right, and God be with Greta and all the rest of them.
Israel's defense minister, Yisrael Katz, commended the Navy for quickly seizing the vessel. Footage taken before the soldiers boarded shows that the activists were preparing to stage a non-violent protest. Then Katz announced that he had ordered the military to show the detained activists footage of the crimes committed on October 7, 2023, as soon as they safely arrive at the port. By the way, this is a brilliant move on Israel's part, because the point is they clearly have no idea about the evil of Hamas. Either they deny it, or maybe they even take part in it.
Or maybe, by the way, they already know everything and just don't care anymore.
She specifically emphasized that the Democrats defended Kelmar Abrigo Garcia, even though he, of course, is suspected of committing these crimes. Do you think the Democrats are taking a political risk of playing into the president's hands by focusing on this case?
First of all, I don't know a single Democrat who would defend him.
He's a member of Congress. Raskin, he's just as much of a jerk as Rashkin, who appears on all sorts of Russian-language podcasts. But Raskin is a little better. At least he's better dressed than Rashkin. Well, just a little bit. So he just said that not a single Democrat has ever defended this. He meant a specific person, a drug dealer and a pimp whom we haven't talked about. And right then he got caught. Look.
He was falsely arrested and expelled from the country. And now they're making up all these stories about Mara Salvatrucha 13. Or, let's say he was responsible for the January 6th attack and coordinated the assault on 140 police officers. They're making up accusations against a man who has never been held accountable, let alone convicted of any crime.
No one ever, Mom.
In our previous video, we talked about how the people's hero of the Democrats, the one and only, unique Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, is now being extradited. He is being returned to the United States, but not as a free man, as the Democrats had hoped. In reality, he is returning to this, because today he has just been charged with criminal offenses. A grand jury in the state of Tennessee has brought serious and well-founded charges against him for human trafficking and conspiracy, and we have already shared the details in the previous video. But of course, all of this looks extremely unfavorable for Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And considering this, I really became interested in how the Democrats would react to it, because objectively, this whole situation makes them look very foolish. You see, when the Trump administration, initially tried to claim that Kilmar Garcia is a member of Mara Salvatrucha 13, that he is a criminal, that he is a suspect, a bad guy, not a good person at all. How did the Democrats respond to that? They stated that he is a father from Maryland. They said there is absolutely no evidence of his connection to Mara Salvatrucha 13 or to any criminal activity. The Trump administration is making this up despite admitting there isn't enough evidence to support their claims. Didn't they also claim that the court documents and even actual police reports where Mara Salvatrucha 13 was mentioned everywhere, they called those fake? They claim the police officer lied, calling it a ridiculous excuse. Now, ladies and gentlemen, forget what the Trump administration says. Forget the words of Pam Bondi. The very fact that the grand jury reviewed real evidence and unanimously decided that there is more than enough reason to bring criminal charges against this illegal immigrant. What will the Democrats say now?
But most importantly, the Democrats keep taking the side of criminals who commit their crimes against those who are supposed to vote. And for some reason, the Democrats hope that these very people whom they have sold out and betrayed will be so foolish that they'll run to vote for those who make their lives worse and more dangerous. Well, who knows? Maybe they will. And there are about 138 times more idiots than non-idiots, maybe even 536 times more. Let's check the statistics because, you know, to avoid being idiots, they say those are the idiots on that side and we're on this side. No, let's check the statistics, not just go by hearsay.
4 months ago. Now it's already 4 months into the new second term of the Trump administration, and something strange happened. If you look at the polls after Trump's ratings dropped, when he announced that he was going to impose high tariffs on certain countries, which caused panic in the stock market. Now the market has almost fully recovered or has already regained all its losses. It dipped a little when Trump announced that he would continue the tariffs. What, to make the European Union ensure a reciprocal relationship with the United States? But nevertheless, Trump is in the middle range, which, to be honest, are mostly made up of left-leaning polls, still lag behind by only 1 to 1.5%. But in other polls, for example, Rasmussen, he is either tied or ahead by a couple of points. And yet all the media and all the major outlets on the left, but even in the center and on the right, for example, the one we've already mentioned, they were unanimous.
TVs, radios, the internet, everywhere, even from the West. Some people keep throwing mud at Trump nonstop, but despite all that, he keeps growing in public opinion.
Every time people say we're heading toward a recession or that the trade war will crash the economy, new data comes out. This week, it turned out that corporate profits were unusually high, strong. It became clear that we don't have a recession in the housing market. Home sales remain stable. Inflation is going down. Energy prices have dropped significantly. Economic growth is increasing and unemployment is decreasing. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is that Donald Trump is traveling around the world, and you could call this mercantilism, but essentially this is the Trump doctrine. We will not enter into military conflicts of our own choosing anywhere, and our relations with other countries will be pragmatic and transactional. So even with our enemies, as much as possible, we will try to find some mechanism that will allow us to stop wars.
This is what I say every day and every hour. We have invented atomic, chemical, and biological devices to kill each other. If we don't learn to solve our problems without war, we could destroy the human race. We could turn the earth into a radioactive cloud. That's all, folks. Trump is the only leader in the world who says, we settle all disputes not with stones like Cain and Abel, but all through politics, yes. For centuries, wars were fought and politicians, both elected and unelected, acted in this manner. So what methods does he suggest for resolving them then? He proposes various solutions, but the main thing is that we will find some kind of solution. The main thing is to avoid settling things with a club. Friends, on Sundays at 10 in the morning, I'll continue now, I just remembered. I'll tell you, at 10 in the morning on Sunday. In Los Angeles, that's 1 o'clock. In New York, it's 1:20. And in Kiev and Jerusalem, it's 20 past midnight. I do a live broadcast where I share my observations and conclusions, and then after that, I answer questions. So the broadcast is going on 2 channels. One is Leon Vainstain United States in one word, Leon Vainstain United States in English. And the second one is That Means Roadmap to Freedom. Find any of them and watch there. Well, let's continue now. Later, the mass media reported that the same person who financed the anti-Semitic pro-Hamas riots at universities, Neville Singham, also funds the protests against the deportation of criminal illegals. Neville, the son of a Sri Lankan citizen and a Cuban mother, became a billionaire and now serves to support the propaganda of the Chinese Communist Party. In his youth, he was a member of the Black Revolutionary Workers Youth Organization. Let's just say you could probably translate it that way, although he, of course, is nowhere near black. This is a Marxist group, just to be clear, in the United States. At the moment, Neville is sponsoring it. It's called the Party of Socialism and Liberation. Liberation from your wallet, as I understand it, right? It's also a Marxist group that has taken responsibility for organizing these riots. In Los Angeles, San Diego, and other cities where raids are taking place. This is the police, specifically the department that's responsible for catching and deporting illegal immigrants from the country. And the hired and trained ones, well, first as Antifa, then Black Lives Matter, so basically saboteurs. They damage property and start fires in neighborhoods where working and middle-class Americans live. You see, when God wants to punish, he takes away reason. Just look at Ukraine. Everyone in Ukraine knows that their life, well-being, and the future of their children depend on one person in this world. Today, that person is the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump. But every day, every hour, Ukrainians in the press and in private conversations constantly say that Trump is a vile creature, a murderer, an idiot, a traitor, a liar. Pushkinskaya, Putin's lackey and a freak. Also a freak, yes, with yellow hair, a freak, both morally and physically a freak. I'm not even mentioning the things you can't say when you're hosting a podcast. So tell me, is this reasonable? I mean, how can people become such massive idiots that they can't understand something so simple? Friends, you can't say nasty things about the only person who can help you get out of a deadly situation. For you, your children, your country, and everything else. But again, as I've said many times, I don't live there. It's the same with Dem Party. That's why I started telling this story. They are losing the support of workers, craftsmen, Kamivik, Zhurov, Belik, Chernik, Latins, and Asians every day. Why? Because the country's population doesn't want illegals living next to them, especially criminals. What is the position of the Democratic Party? To protect criminal illegals from deportation. Think about it yourself. They protect criminal illegals from deportation, right? They start fires, riots in cities where the police want to catch criminals and deport them from the country so that they don't live next to us, so we aren't killed, robbed, or raped. But the Democrats interfere with this. They fight against American police officers, hiding them in order to keep as many rapists, murderers, thieves, and those who bring drugs and children into the United States of America as possible, so-called child prostitution. Do you think this is a winning position in the elections of 26 and 28? In 26, it's the midterms, and in 28, it's already the presidential election. Many people have already started thinking about this. Yes, Trump is trying to create jobs in the United States so that people have well-paid work. The Democrats in Congress, let's say, yes, are doing everything they can to make China win and keep bringing goods into the United States, destroying American jobs. Don't you think so? No? Yes. Trump says, get the men out of women's sports. The Democrats say never. Trump says, we need to stop paying for gender reassignment surgeries in the military. A person joins the military, visits the doctor, and requests gender reassignment surgery, which costs $200,000. The speaker questions the validity and purpose of this procedure. Well, and in general, it should be banned. By the way, Trump has said this many times. He continues to insist that a presidential decree, possibly already enacted, still needs to be implemented. By law, you can't touch children at all until they're 18. 18 when they have the right to make decisions, even though they're still idiots at that age. But by law, they have the right to decide something. So until they're 18, just don't touch them at all. Whoever committed the crime deserves a 20-30-year prison sentence. So the Democrats say that Trump is proposing to make a temporary tax cut for the middle class and make it permanent for workers. And they will fight against this until their last breath or, until the last drop of blood. So Trump says, guys, workers, middle class, we want to lower your taxes. How do you feel about that? They say, we're very happy. But the Democrats say, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. Yeah, we would rather die than let that happen. Well, what can I tell you? Don't you have a feeling that God is punishing them for something? By the way, an interesting thing, just now the Supreme Court made a historic decision. You're going to be amazed, ladies and gentlemen, by what had to be decided. Thank God the vote was 9-0. That's rare for us. It's usually a closer split, like 7-2 or 6-3, but 9-0 really means something, right? All the members of the Supreme Court voted. This is another historic decision. This is a new era in the United States of America. But again, you won't believe it now. Moving forward,
it's incredible. This is one of the greatest events of the last 30 years. I'm saying this absolutely. The United States Supreme Court sided with a heterosexual woman in a high-profile reverse discrimination case. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been saying for many years on this podcast that when Barack Obama became president and appointed the racist Eric Holder to head the so-called Department of Justice, they decided that you can't discriminate against the majority, you can only discriminate against minorities. And that's why they never defended the rights of the majority anywhere or at any time. And this lie, this legal manipulation existed in our country for free because not a single Republican would fight against this because no one dared to say it was stupid. Super.
Let me explain. It's impossible to understand this if you don't know. Obama and Eric Holder, he was his minister, the budget president. A horrible Russian mug. Yes, sometimes there's a black Russian mug. Black Russian? Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's brown. This one was a black Russian mug. Yes, they established a rule for United States courts that discrimination can only be against minorities. Whites are not minorities. Jews at that time were also not considered minorities. Why, by the way, is completely unclear. Trump has already changed this. That is, he made it so, yes. But Jews were not considered a minority. Well, that's fantastic, really. So if I explain, what does that mean? So if a white person was not hired for a job or not accepted into an educational institution or denied some kind of service, then a black, Latino, or Asian person was, I don't know. Lesbian women could go to court and sue, but white people and Jews could not. The court said they can't do anything as they received an order from the Ministry of Justice. I wasn't aware it was official. I thought it was just being kept quiet.
You can't discriminate against anyone. That's what equality before the law means. The Supreme Court of the United States has just voted unanimously 9-0 to confirm this. And kid, it's already dead. Got it? It's all dead.
That means discrimination against the majority is dead. And now everyone who for many years was ignored, not accepted, pushed aside, not given the chance, and not allowed to go to court, to file complaints, to even deal with these matters, to complain, they will go to court. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, discrimination has died today. That's the whole story. Pay attention to the American flag outside the window of the man who's telling all this, to the flag. That's from the time of the Revolution, the American Revolution, in the corner of the room on the stuffed eagle. And on the flag, by the way, it says, "You can't see it." But I just know, yeah, it's better not to mess with me.
On Thursday, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision in a case of so-called reverse discrimination filed by a heterosexual woman against her former employer. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled that it was more difficult for plaintiff Marlene Imes to sue her former employer than it would have been if she were homosexual. The ruling states that members of the majority do not need to present additional circumstances beyond the usual requirements to prove their claim. Under Section 7 of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, which protects Americans from discrimination in employment based on race, religion, sex, or national origin. The United States Supreme Court overturned the lower court's decision that Ames could not sue the Ohio Department of Youth Services because she did not show evidence of discrimination by the majority of the departments. Imes, who worked in the Department of Youth Services for 20 years, filed a lawsuit because she was passed over for a promotion and demoted in favor of gay colleagues. According to the Department of Youth Services, Ohio, he hired Ames in 2004 and 10 years later promoted her to administrator under the Prison Rape Elimination Act in 2014. She interviewed for another position, but she wasn't accepted. Her gay supervisor suggested she retire, and a few days later, Ames was demoted with a significant pay cut. Then a 25-year-old gay man was promoted to administrator of Pupria, and a few months later, the department chose a lesbian woman for the position that Imes had unsuccessfully applied for. A panel of 3 judges from the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed that Ames would have won the case if she were a lesbian, but they ruled against her because she did not meet the additional requirement of minority status. Basically, they were saying it's allowed to discriminate against members of the majority, but the Supreme Court said no. We conclude that Section 7 does not establish such a heightened standard for plaintiffs from the majority, wrote Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, representing the liberal wing on behalf of the court. And nothing that Ohio presented in its written explanations or at the hearings convinces us otherwise. Despite the progressive ideology of the radical left, the Supreme Court ruled that discrimination against the majority is unconstitutional. Discrimination is discrimination. It's simple and clear.
You might say it just can't be that simple. That's 8 years of the America-hating President Obama, and then another 4 years of Crazy Joe. Well, you reap what you sow. Now we're sowing something different. Now we've restored morality, honesty, and justice. Now we're not trying to discriminate against anyone, neither minorities nor majorities. Unless, of course, God has taken away your mind. But there's nothing we can do about that. No, we can't. I thought we can't. I specifically didn't show you a journalist. It's not about politics there, but just an ordinary American who shared his joy. He was shouting out of happiness. Yes, he was sharing it with the world, right? So, just so you understand, 7 people watched it, meaning 7 friends and relatives. I think so, and I was the 8th. I dug it up. I wanted to see the reaction of ordinary people, and I found it. So, but he shared his joy and his truth with the Lord. Up to twice a week, I release a special video for sponsors. Sponsorship is just $4 per month, but you can give more if you'd like. Oh, by the way, if you pay for a year, it will be just $3 per month. But, so to speak, this is what helps us, let's say, to cover all sorts of technical expenses. And we are very grateful. If you become a sponsor in the near future, as soon as we have a few more people, I will start holding meetings with sponsors. Because, well, as they say, you help us, we help you. It's a way to express our gratitude somehow. That's all. Until next time.